Hey, it's Marisa, and I wanted to continue my book review video blog series. And this is just the second one that I'm doing. And this is the first time I'm going to review a work of fiction. And I'm going to alternate between fiction and nonfiction because part of me wants to learn something that's relevant and part of me wants pure escapism, to go into another world that's not like my own so I can experience what it's like to be different people experiencing different things and feeling different emotions. Now this book, Pachinko by Min Jin Lee, was recommended by my friend Laura Belgray, who's a world-class copywriter. And I asked Laura for recommendations for books because she's one of the best writers I know. And I found that one of the best way to get better at writing, whether you want to get better at marketing writing or whatever it happens to be, copywriting, whatever, is to read really good books and to ask for book recommendations from people you respect. So Laura said, you've got to read Pachinko. It's absorbed me unlike any other book for a long time. So I picked this up and I was like, it's kind of a funny name, and Pachinko is a kind of gambling in Japan. It's kind of like slot machines, but Japanese style, right? And so I started to read this book, and I kid you not, in the very first chapter of this book, 8 people died. And I was like, what is this, a Shakespearean tragedy, you know? But I decided to hang in there and read it, and I wanted to share my 3 biggest insights from this book. Now, the first one related to 8 people dying in the very first chapter, and that is that the fear of death used to be an everyday occurrence for human beings. Like 300 years ago, even 200 years ago, most people faced death on a regular basis. And now today, maybe 20% of the population has really faced the real possibility of death. And the rest of us are secure. We have nothing to fear except ourselves. And that's kind of amazing, and I think sometimes it's to our detriment. Because when you've got that fear of death in you, it causes you to kind of do things that you would never expect to do. Many people talk about insecurity as being this huge problem, a lack of confidence. But I think that over-security can be an even bigger problem. Because when you're over-secure, you're no longer moving towards things. You don't feel alive, because it's well known that as humans, we feel most alive when we're at the edge of our comfort zone, going for something that feels beyond our grasp, where danger is real, where failure is possible. And the bigger the challenge, the greater the accomplishment when we hit it. The challenge is that we feel most secure when we know exactly what's going to happen day after day. So you've got to balance that need for challenge and growth with that need for security, and to find a happy medium between the two, and that's going to be different for every single person. But if you don't have that fear of death, or even if the fear of death might look like a fear of public speaking, which is often higher than the fear of death for many people, what are those things that can awaken your fear? Because fear is a good thing. It shows you that you're moving towards something outside of your comfort zone. Fear is an indicator of challenge and growth and doing something that you don't know how to do. Fear shows you that you care enough, that you're feeling alive. So my first biggest takeaway here is that I need more fear in my life. It doesn't have to be fear of death, but I need to do things that scare me. So to constantly figure out, where's my edge? What's the thing that's going to push me towards that edge and reawaken my fear? So for example, the last Message 20 Live event, I asked myself, where's my edge? Because that was the 7th time that I facilitated that event. And it was the best time because I asked myself that question. So I would still be fresh and alive and vibrant versus the same person teaching the same thing in the same way and putting my audience to sleep. And I decided my edge was vulnerability. Trying to show more of myself emotionally, show my audience who I really was, to leave my blood, my sweat, my tears on that stage. So over the 3 days at Message 20 Live, I shared more of myself. I shared things that was scary for me to share. I amplified who I was being on that stage even more, until I was scared at the level of expression I was conveying, until I wondered, will people judge me? What will they think? And that's when I knew that I was in the zone. So what are those things that scare you that you're committed to doing? How can you reawaken that fear of death, or fear of adventure, or fear of challenge, or fear of growth, or whatever that fear looks like to you, fear of failure, whatever it is? What's going to get you to be more of who you are? So that was my first life-changing insight from this book. You ready for my second one? Anyone? Who's ready for number 2? Okay. So insight number 2 is that Min Jin Lee wrote a masterpiece, and this is a National Book Award finalist. It's won all kinds of awards. But here's the thing, she had this idea for 30 years. When she was in college, she heard a lecturer come and talk about Koreans living in Japan, and she was so fascinated by that lecture because it was a side of both Koreans and Japanese that she had never known of before. So she was curious enough to start to write about this topic. And at first she started with small articles and she got one published. And then after that first win, it took her decades to really flesh out the story and to create her masterpiece. And I think it's so often the case with business is we have these ideas that may have been birthed in us when we were children. One of my students was doing one of my superpower exercises, and she was really struggling to figure out her superpower. And then she found this drawing that she did as a 5-year-old child. And the drawing was, I see the world through my heart, spelled H-O-R-T. And she realized that she knew her superpower as a 5-year-old child, and then she forgot it for the next 40 years of her life. And when she found that sheet of paper, she remembered it again. And that deeper level and meaning of what her business was started to come through again. So often, the business that you're meant to be building was planted in you as a child, as a teenager. Whatever it happens to be, this may have been germinating for decades. But here's the thing about that. You may think, is it too late for me? But think of it this way. You're like a vintage wine. You've just been growing older and aging, and all of that's making that wine so much more tasty and rich and delicious. So you are ready, no matter how long you've been brewing this idea or this talent or this gift that you want to share, you are ready, and it's just gotten better for all the years that it's been there latent, ready to come out. So instant insight number 3 also relates to Min Jin Lee's journey as an author, rather than what was happening in the book itself, her process to write this book. Now, being, I think, a Korean American, Min Jin Lee didn't really understand what it was like to be a Korean in Japan, 300 years ago. And she knew she was off track until she went and got a fellowship and lived in Japan and interviewed hundreds of people. Interviewed people about the game Pachinko, about yakuzas, about all kinds of aspects of Japanese cuisine. And only after spending time in Japan interviewing hundreds of people was she finally able to write this masterpiece. And I think so often we try to create our masterpieces alone without talking to the people that really understand the problem we're trying to solve or the solution we want to provide. And I always tell my students, go talk to people sooner or later, and before you can make money while you sleep, you gotta be able to make money while you're awake. Because the truth is that your $1 million business, your 8-figure business, whatever it happens to be, it's not gonna happen alone at home. It's gonna happen when you take the time to talk to people who are impacted by the problem you solve and the solution you offer. Really get to know them, because they're gonna bring your business to life. They're gonna bring your products and your services to life. And if you try to do that without talking to them, it's like Min Jin Lee trying to write this saga about Koreans in Japan 200 years ago without really knowing what it was like to be a Korean in Japan 200 years ago. Now, you may be closer to the experience of your audience because a lot of times your target market is a younger, greener version than you. But still, to connect with them and to hear their challenges and hear their desires through their mouth and through their lens is so important. You cannot create your masterpiece without having those conversations, without talking to the people who are impacted, not 5 years ago, but today, by the problem you solve and the solution you offer. So those, my friend, are my 3 life-changing insights from Pachinko. And I know it's a thick book here, but it's a very good book if you want a very good read. I mean, I could barely get out of the house on vacation because I was just so immersed in this book. So what I'm gonna do is whoever writes the best comment down below on this blog, I'm gonna send you this copy of Pachinko. There we have it, leave a comment, and as also if there's a book that you'd want me to review and read, let me know in the chat. So go out there, live your message,